pain, whatever it is you're doing. These are the mechanical elements of it. What I think many admissions committees are more interested in is...
We are live here in the Mapped group for another amazing episode of Ask the Dean, episode 13, with the most acclaimed Dr. Scott Wright. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How's everything in Colorado?
Everything is smoky, actually. There's lots of wildfires going on. It's very hazy and smoky, but that's okay because I'm inside anyway all day because of COVID. Thank you very much. But that is life. And the wonderful Rachel Grubbs. How are you?
I'm well, and I'm glad you used a claim to describe Scott. I know we talked about adjectives for him last week, and I gave you all adjectives beginning with the letter A.
Yes.
Because I got bored after that.
And that is where that came from.
But over the next year, I can slowly work through the other 25 letters.
There we go. This is a little bit of a different Ask the Dean for just one small reason is I'm actually going to release this out on the Premed years. So if you're listening to this in the Premed years podcast, hello and welcome to Ask the Dean. Actually, you get to listen to Ask the Dean. Well, you get to listen to Ask the Dean all the time because it's live, not live, but it's available at mapped.tv is actually our YouTube channel that has Ask the Dean on there where we release every episode once a week. So go over there to mapped.tv. But we're releasing this Premed Years episode here on August 19th because on August 24th, we have a big day. What is that day, Rachel?
Mapped goes to public beta. So we will still be in beta. We're still working on bugs and make it better and better. But instead of pre-ordering and going, win, we'll have access, you will order and you will have access.
Yep. You will order and have immediate access to Mapped. Starting August 24th, the time we haven't announced yet, not to pull a double AMC here for MCAT registration, but we actually have to click the button. But it'll be about, I don't know what time. It doesn't matter. Just go check out mapped.com.
It'll be no later than noon Eastern.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the plan. And speaking of bugs, we found a big one today with our GPA calculations. We missed a few things here and there, but that's okay. We're going to get that fixed. We decided to launch Mapped as a public beta because, number one, there are still bugs, which it's software. There's always going to be bugs probably. But there's still a lot of just glaring bugs, I think, that we were hoping to be fixed by now, but that's okay. It doesn't affect how you can use Mapped. But I think the other big thing too is that we have so many features that we wanted in version 1 and we want Mapped in your hands and wanted to get it to you sooner. So we're releasing it to everyone August 24th. So if you're watching this as a Mapped pre-order user and you're in there playing with it and you like it, go tell your friends. Starting August 24th, they can go sign up as well. And come join the fun. We had an amazing meeting today, a little focus group with some pre-med, pre-health advisors and a director of admissions at a medical school, and they all seemed to love it. So I'm excited for the future of what we have going on here at MAP. So that's what I got. Map.com, August 24th. Let's get to Ask the Dean.
Woo. All right. First up, question.
Would taking temperatures and blood pressures at a dentist office count for patient contact hours for medical school? Ooh. It depends on if it's a rectal or a forehead temperature, right? It's usually the differentiation.
Do what?
That was such a deep joke that went right over your head,
Scott. I mean, I was like, wait a minute.
I said it depends on if it's a rectal or a forehead temperature.
Well, since it's a dentist office, I would hope it's not a rectal temperature taking. So we'll just see.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think, the first thing I would ask is, was the student ever thinking about going into dentistry and they switched over to medicine? If that was like part of why they're working in a dental office to start with, or where was the genesis of this sort of dental office job, and their ability to explain it would be important, I think, within the context of a description of the experience in a medical school application. Now, having said that, it is patient contact. These are patients in a healthcare setting, and you are, being active with them, albeit, for a short period of time when they first come into the dental office. It's not notably different than what a medical assistant would do and then take into a medical clinic. Maybe not quite as much medical history probably that they would be taking or whatever, but so very similar to that. So I think it's plausible that that it would count for clinical hours for a med school application.
Yeah, we get this question a lot, whether it's around being a physical therapy assistant or something
pharmacy
similar to a physical therapy
or
assistant in a chiropractic office. Definitely pharmacy tech, and really, I think at the heart of all of those types of it's patient care technically, but not necessarily in a hospital with MDDO medicine. Or an outpatient setting, MDDO medicine. It's patient care. You're interacting with patients in some sort of clinical way. I think that the biggest takeaway that we always have with this is make sure that it's probably not the majority, your main clinical experience for the application.
Right. Agreed.
So
totally agree.
Good one.
That. Yep. That's a good question.
Yeah, I like that one. All right. Next up on the chopping block, we have I recently just got an unpaid internship volunteering for a local nonprofit with a physician. I have to decide whether I would like college credit. As a post-bac student, I don't need credits to graduate. Do medical schools consider this as volunteer hours if I also receive college credit? Or will I need to do the 0 credit option to receive volunteer hours? Thank you all so much. This is interesting. So this is very similar, Scott, to the question we had a couple weeks ago where a student talked about what I think it was through their athletics or through like the fraternity or sorority.
Right.
Are those volunteer hours discounted because they're through an organization and not something a student lined up themselves? It's kind of similar.
Yeah, very similar. And my first reaction is, unless you pointed it out, I think many on an admissions committee would not even notice that they're connected.
They're not looking at the extracurricular list and then looking at the courses going, do these line up?
Yeah. So I think it particularly on a first review of an application, they're usually fairly quick and fairly that they're not doing the deep dive into an application. They're sort of looking for certain data points that they want to concentrate on for deciding whether or not they're going to take them in as an interviewee. But even once it gets to the admissions committee level after an interview, it would take a pretty savvy admissions committee member to even connect those two dots if you didn't connect them yourself. So I would say if you don't need the credit hours, then why do it?
Why even ask
for credit? Yeah, why even do it for credit? And but I don't know that I would worry about that either way.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up. If a student doesn't call it out themselves, right? Is that knowing how pre-meds think? Is that some sort of like dishonesty? Are they trying to hide something?
No. I think that's overthinking it. I think honestly, what the admissions committee members are looking for is, what did you get out of this? What's the value of this experience? What did you get out of it? Whether you got credit for it or not, deep dive into why was this important to you? What did you learn out of this experience? What's the value, meaning creation things, or what we're looking for when we're looking at these activity experiences and stuff. Whether or not you got credit for it, or whether whatever, whether it was with a sports team or your fraternity or sorority or whatever. I think that the key to all of it is the meaning part, is the value of it part. So I wouldn't sort of do a bunch of mental gymnastics to try to figure out how to do
But
that.
that's what pre-meds are best at, Scott.
Oh,
we
absolutely.
like to do mental gymnastics.
I know it.
I took human anatomy, clinical physiology, microbiology, psychology, and sociology for my nursing degree a long time ago. Will they still be considered good for medical school admission? All right, so this is a great question, and actually,
it is
something very similar to like what MAPT, our ultimate goal with MAPT is to be able to put those courses in and know that what I'm assuming the answer is not, they don't count, right? So a lot of times these nursing level classes don't count.
Right. Okay, so so I think we got to even
and they were at a foreign institution.
So I think the foreign institution is the bigger issue here. I know that many medical schools, perhaps most medical schools, are going to require that those prerequisites be taken in the U.S. at a U.S. accredited U.S. institution. So that's the bigger issue here. Now, let's draw that aside and say, okay, let's create an applicant who did this very thing talking about, did them at a U.S. institution fairly long ago, and talk about that scenario. And in that case, there are medical schools who want particularly the prerequisites to be recent. They don't want them to be 7, 8, 10 years ago or whatever. So there are medical schools where those would expire and not be applicable to meeting the prerequisites. Secondarily, if those courses were taken as a part of your nursing curriculum, it's likely that the medical schools are not going to count those because they're not for science majors. They were for a professional program in nursing or some allied health program of some sort. So for example, if your anatomy class prefix is BIOL and it's anatomy, then that's one thing. If it's NURS and in the nursing curriculum is anatomy, for example, all of the programs in Texas at Texas Application Service, we would not allow those to move forward as meeting the prerequisite because they were taken as a part of a allied health program and would not be applicable. So I think there's several elements here that need to be sort of considered in that process. The foreign institution element, the element of when they were taken, and then the element of within what academic context they were taken.
Yeah, and then the other kind of extra bit of this that comes up a lot, and it wasn't specifically asked with this question, but it was kind of potentially hinted at with, I took these courses a long time ago, is this myth for the most part that prereqs expire. Right?
Well, I think the issue here is not as much the issue of expiration in a bureaucratic way, but it is the idea that if you are that far away from that material, then what is this going to mean about your ability to perform in the classroom, particularly in the first 6-9 weeks of medical school? First 6 weeks of medical school, first 9 weeks of medical school, crucial to setting a good tone for establishing study habits, everything. And if you're playing catch up from day one, then this can spell disaster. Yeah, this is bad.
Yeah, just go watch the Scott, have you ever watched the video about eating pancakes in medical school?
No.
No, it's an amazing video. Rachel, have you ever watched that video? No. Okay. So everyone, here's your homework. Google eating pancakes in medical school, just on YouTube. It's a YouTube video. Basically, the gist is that every day you have to eat 10 pancakes. Okay? That is your goal in medical school. But some days you're not very hungry and you don't want to eat 10 pancakes. So you only eat 5. But guess that's what that means for tomorrow. Now you got to eat 15 pancakes. But you can only eat 10. And so you only eat 10 and then it's 15 the next day. And then so you're always behind at the end of the day. So it's a really good video.
I'll have to look that
really
up.
Highlighting, right? We always talk about the drinking from a fire hose, but eating pancakes is definitely a great analogy. At least how they tell the story.
Yeah, it is. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's right. So I talked with a student who got an interview to medical school, and I don't know the follow up whether she got in or not, but she was a physical therapist and hadn't taken classes in 20 years, and she didn't go back and do more classes. But she took her MCAT, did great on it, and she got interviews at medical schools. And obviously she had already gone through professional school as a physical therapist, and so there's some built-in trust to her ability to handle medical school, and obviously doing well on the MCAT helped as well. So just an extra little bonus mention that this whole myth of prereqs expiring is just that for the most part.
Yeah.
Not to say there aren't a few schools out there that do have expiration dates. Whew. All right. So kind of following up on the patient care question earlier, the same verdict working as a CNA in a skilled nursing facility / rehab, not in a hospital setting. So this actually for me, this question isn't anywhere near the same as the other one, right? The earlier one was, I guess they're kind of similar, right? Taking blood pressure and temperature. A CNA obviously who does a lot with patients, but in a skilled nursing facility, rehab, I guess, SCIF, or a SNF. I mean, that's clinical experience. that's the definition. Yep. I think students get very caught up with hospital equals clinical experience. And that's not always the case, right? Again, clinical experience is interacting with patients. Now, there's in my mind, and I think in yours, there's a difference between a skilled nursing facility and a dentist office. I think that was the differentiation, right? Yes. Dentist office, PT office, chiropractic office.
Yes.
A skilled nursing facility is a clinical setting similar to a hospital setting, outpatient setting. So yeah, definitely the same.
And let me add to that is that the concentration here is not mechanically what are you doing with the patients. Taking temperature, taking blood pressure, changing their sheets, emptying their bed pan, whatever it is you're doing. These are the mechanical elements of it. What I think many admissions committees are more interested in is personal qualities that you gain from patient interaction. Are you experiencing these patient interactions? And are there things coming from that, such as your ability to think about and reflect on what all that meant to you? But also, for example, are you getting a letter of recommendation from the person at the nursing facility that says, man, this person is fantastic with patients. They love them. They respond to them when they come into the room and they're doing their thing and they're just so interact, whatever. And that's the important stuff. The fact that you took their temperature as opposed to emptying their bedpan, yes, that's clinical activities and stuff, but somebody that has absolutely no personality and the patients hate can still do those same things. Might not be as good a doctor, might not be as good a medical student, but they can still take a temperature and empty a bedpan. What I'm more interested in as an admissions officer is what did they get out of this, and what was their relationship with these patients like? And are we getting input from letter writers and stuff that say, I got stuff out of this that made me a better person, and I hope that I made the patients feel better or made their day better or whatever.
Yeah. And that's the difference between what we and I have been harping on for so long and what we harp on here on Ask the Dean is that it goes so much beyond what you did. Right.
Yep.
It's not just
That's
checking
right.
the box. It's
That's
the
right.
reflection and what it did for you and how you grew from it and everything else. And it's so important. And I know there's a contingency of you out there listening to me going, that's BS. I know it's just stats. And that's okay. I'll hopefully win you over in the long run. But I am telling you, it is much more than stats and that those reflection stats and what you did. Right. So don't just go and do the thing to check off the box.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Preaching to the choir there. Preaching to the choir.
I know.
I was just thinking, if Dr. Gray can convince them, surely someone who has sat on an admissions committee and managed all of Texas admissions could maybe convince them.
Yeah. It used to be, here's a little vulnerable moment for me. It used to be, I had this imposter syndrome when I started the podcast. Like, who am I? I never sat on an admissions committee. I was never the dean or director of admissions anywhere. But I'm lucky enough to have amazing relationships with people like Dr. Wright and other admission committee members and people who do have all of that expertise. And they just, they're able to take the money that I bribe them with to agree with me.
Yeah. You started out so serious.
And then I did.
Right. I wanted to chime in for this one because I'm saying, as I put it up, this is, I think, episode 14 of Ask the Dean, and I'm not sure, but I think it might be the 11th time we've been asked it.
Yep.
I'm going to put it out there anyway because people keep asking, so people are still worried about it.
Yep. It's actually something I wanted to talk to you, Rachel, about maybe trying to set up maybe as an offshoot of Story, some sort of virtual shadowing for students where we do some sort of Zoom call with a physician and get students on board.
Yeah. So here's the question. What are your thoughts on virtual shadowing during the pandemic? How will AdComs view virtual shadowing? And again, we get this every week, but that means that a lot of you are wondering. So let's dig in.
Let's dig in. All right. Virtual shadowing.
Yep.
Any other year would be like, why are you doing that? Get out of your house and go put in some effort and get into a doctor's office, right? Call in those connections if you have them. Reach out to friends, family, cold call, email, all of that stuff. And I know it's still very hard for a lot of students to find shadowing, but obviously this year, with the pandemic, if you're watching this or listening to this in the future, like, what are you talking about this year? In the middle of a pandemic, the shadowing is almost non-existent. So virtual shadowing is the next best thing, and it's better than nothing.
Yep. And I will point out that, the question says, how will admissions committees view virtual shadowing? Think about it this way. They're having to deal with virtual or online courses. Mm-hmm. They are having to virtually interview students.
Yep.
So why would they look any differently at virtual shadowing? Everything is virtual right now. Everything is virtual right now. Let's repeat that once again. Everything is virtual right now. So admissions committees are going to recognize this, and they don't have a choice.
Yep.
They're going to have to see that, as you said, this is a different kind of year, and it is what it is. And so at least virtual shadowing is something. And so do it.
It's something. And I think a lot of students will probably do it. Hopefully they'll do it. And then they won't put it on their application for fear that it'll look silly and why is this just virtual shadowing? But I encourage all of you to put it on there and let the admissions committee members do what they will do with it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. Agree wholeheartedly.
Good. That's why I like having you around. You make me feel better. Here's a good one. So I am scoring low in the CARS section of the MCAT, but doing well in the other sections. I believe it's due to the fact that I started learning English when I was a teenager, which is why my reading speed is pretty low and my vocabulary is not as rich as a native speaker. Is this something medical schools will acknowledge, or is this simply not a good enough reason for a low CARS score, which the student says is around a 124? So let me remind everyone that on National Premed Day, we did an episode that we actually released on my YouTube channel at premed.tv separately called Mission Accepted, with a student who had a 121 in CARS and was admitted to an MD school and DO schools as well. And she was an ESL student as well. So in my mind, a 124. Again, this kind of goes back to these pre-med myths of if you score less than a 125, you can't get into medical school in a section. So again, the micro versus macro of what's your total score, and that 124 probably is not going to be an issue.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with that completely. And with regard to, somebody coming to the U.S., learning a new language in as a teenager, maybe in middle school or high school, this is not an unusual circumstance for an admissions committee to see these kinds of things. I think that particularly when students do well at their university and have a strong grade point average, seem to be doing well generally on the MCAT, then I think that what this points out is a huge degree of work ethic that the student has put in making the transition into a new culture, into a new language. Yep. It shows resilience. It shows perseverance. It shows there's a lot of personal things that come from that I think admissions committees are drawn to, because these are the qualities that are important in medical school when the going gets rough and you haven't had sleep near as much as you need, and it's those personal qualities of perseverance and work ethic and motivation and just show up and get it done. Yep. Those kinds of things that admissions committees really center in on. The fact that your CARS score is maybe a point or two or three lower than the other scores, I really don't see a concern here.
Yeah. And let me expand a little bit. I'm not an MCAT expert, but I have a podcast, so it's basically the next best thing. I actually have 2 MCAT podcasts. And I do the MCAT CARS podcast with Jack Weston, and we talk about this a lot. And in my experience, number one, he doesn't believe reading speed is a huge issue. He thinks that's an excuse that students use. And I probably agree, because I have historically been a very slow reader as well. But something for me, when an ESL student says, I do well in the other sections, to me, that's a clue that this student can do perfectly fine in the CARS section, because their reading comprehension is good enough to do well in the other sections. It's probably good enough for the CARS section. Mm-hmm. But we have this mental barrier to go, oh, this is the CARS section. This is the section where I, as an ESL student, shouldn't do as well, and I need to read faster, and I don't have the vocabulary. And so they fill their brain with this negative self-talk as they're going, right? They're trying to read the passage, and they're going, I'm too slow, I'm too slow, I'm too slow. I don't know what that word is. I don't know what that means. I'm too slow, I'm too slow, I'm too slow. And our brain, I'm married to a neurologist. Her dad is a neuropsychologist. And so we talk about brain stuff a lot. The brain can only hold a certain amount of information at any given point in time. It's called your working memory. It's kind of like RAM in a computer. And if you're filling your working memory with this negative self-talk of, I'm going too slow, it sucks that ESL is a detriment to this, I don't know what that word is, my vocabulary is not good enough, you're going to do bad in CARS because of all of that negative self-talk. And so a lot of it is just from a mentality standpoint, knowing that you do well in those other sections, you're good enough to do well in the CARS section. You just need to allow yourself to.
Yeah. A positive self-talk, completely agree with that. It is envisioning. There's another element of this, and that is envisioning. I encourage applicants when they go to the MCAT, when they get to that testing center, they need to be in their car, walking into that testing center, envisioning what is going to happen.
Yep.
The day before, when you check out where the testing site is, envision yourself sitting in that chair, taking that MCAT, doing well. You're putting it out there to the universe to say, this is my vision of what's going to be happening.
Yep.
And
the best athletes do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Definitely.
Completely agree.
So it's a little woo-woo, but that's what I like. I think it works. A question here from a student. Should I update schools regarding my grades and classes taken in summer and fall after having submitted my primary?
Well, I know TMDSAS-wise, you're asked to update TMDSAS, and then we will in turn update the medical schools with an updated GPA and everything. So you'll just communicate that. If you're applying in Texas, you'll communicate that through the application service in Texas, and we'll communicate it to the schools.
So normally students are familiar with AMCAS and ACOMAS where you can't change grades after you submit. So TMDSAS, you can add courses.
Yep.
Very cool.
And you're actually required to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they want the latest, everything. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's look at it from the admissions committee side of it. So as you're the former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, if a student was borderline and those grades could have helped, is that something you take into account, or it's just like so much extra data, you're like, I don't have time to go through it?
No. Yeah. And it's like I said previously, a couple of questions ago, I think it's different on an initial review than it might be on the deep dive in the admissions committee, where they're really looking at very detailed information. And maybe that, maybe those summer grades or those fall grades could make the difference in terms of how they're going to view the student. For example, if a student in the spring semester struggled in a class, let's say they made a C in biochemistry 1, and then they were taking biochemistry 2 in the fall. The admissions committee may very well say, well, I sure would like to know that fall grade, because that would make me much more comfortable if they had made, a much better grade in that biochem 2 class. So I do think it can make a difference. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think a lot of times the impetus behind this question and a lot of the actions behind updating schools is that it's this Hail Mary of like, my grades are terrible, they're not good. Oh, but I got a 3.7 this last semester, so hopefully this will help me. Right. And again, that's kind of this macro thing that we talk about. Big picture, what does your whole academic record show? Is one semester is not going to bail you out.
Right. That's right. It's more the long haul. Over the period of time, and looking at those trends, trends which is absolutely something that the MAP software is doing, and will help you envision it. That's why it's really nice that it's a visual for you to see what those trends look like, because that's often what admissions committee members are really going to be looking at is what is the trend here, and am I comfortable with this trend in terms of how the student is doing. Particularly if you're on the bubble, but not exclusively. But if you're on the bubble and it could go either way, and the trend is maybe not as good, or if the trend is upward, it could mean a lot in terms of you're getting a nod.
Yeah, getting called up to the big leagues.
Yep, absolutely.
What are your thoughts? I want to go back to this virtual world that we're living in now. What are your thoughts about your assumptions about, maybe you've heard through the grapevines, and maybe we have to get through a cycle to see the potential for interviews to either stay virtual or the potential for students who don't have the funds to travel for them to be allowed to do virtual without any sort of negative points against them?
Yeah, I think, that's a toss-up question, really. I think as with so many other things, I think this year and going through this cycle is going to teach a lot of medical schools a lot of different things about the process, how it went. I think that what my guess is that some medical schools are going to say, hey, this virtual interviewing went really well. It gave us all the input we wanted and needed. Let's stick with this. Yep. We like it. It's not as expensive for us. It's not as expensive for the students, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my guess is that there's going to be some medical schools that will go with it. There will be others that will say, no, we're going to go back to, because you have to keep in mind that there are different agenda for the interview. It's not just about the medical school getting to know you and deciding if you're a good fit for the medical school. It is also the other side of the street, which is you getting to know that medical school and evaluating whether you want to be at that institution or not for your medical school years. And doing it virtually doesn't do that at all. It doesn't hit that part of the agenda for a medical school at all, particularly if they know that you're going to be an applicant who's going to get multiple offers. They want you on their campus. They want to show you what they've got. They want you to feel it. They want you to see it. They want you to talk to students. They want that evaluation of you, of their institution. And the virtual reality of that's not going to work. And so I suspect that there's going to be a lot of things coming out of this. There's going to be schools that are going to say, no, we want the students on our campus. There will be other schools that'll say, we'll go with the virtual. There may be some hybrid in some ways of that. So I think it's anybody's guess what's going to be happening literally this time next year, assuming that COVID is not an issue this time next year. God forbid that it still is. But we'll see. I don't know. And I was just thinking about I was going to say this back to the other comments I was making about everything being virtual. I know that there are many, perhaps most, admissions committee meetings are happening virtually. Yep. So they're getting, they're in the middle of this boat just like every student is. And so they're not in some vacuum somewhere outside of the, mainstream of everything and don't really have a clue what's happening. So I think students need to sort of breathe and calm down about this virtual shadowing thing and just let things happen the way they can happen. Yeah. And then not worry about it too much. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens as a result of all this. But I suspect there's going to be some changes at some institutions and maybe not at some others.
Yeah, I think we're seeing COVID rapidly change our culture. Yep. And acceptance of working virtually, interviewing virtually, doing a lot of things virtually that for a long time we didn't think it could be done because we didn't have to have it done. But now that we have to have it done, it's like, oh, it can be done.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies are finding that people are more productive and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about this, and people are connecting on a different level because now when you're in a team meeting, you're not in a sterile boardroom somewhere. You're actually in the person's home with the dog barking in the background, their kid running in, and you realize that everyone is just a person dealing with their own things, and you get so much more of a deeper personal connection, even though it's virtual.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Let's do a little bit of a demo of Mapped for those watching on YouTube. So you can see our Mapped demo account with our current student here showing our GPA graph. And we're in the process of updating, hopefully as soon as we can, these 3 graphs to make them more useful. Let me make that didn't work very well. All right. But we have fun stuff in store. So let me do that. All right. All right, so the GPA graph is pulled obviously from our courses, where we have all of the courses hopefully pulled in from the school that you have selected. And so our student here is at UC Riverside, and we have a full list of courses. So let's look up chemistry, and let's say general biochem. I think we had that one in the list already, but I can look at it now, and we can go through and add our grades. And in the future, we hope a lot of this is automated for prereqs and whether it counts as a science or not. And then we can add it to our list. I'm not going to add it just because we don't need to right now. We can also add our professors. I had this idea, Rachel, where I wonder if Rate My Professor has an API and we can dig into it and have students rate their professors from MAP to go into Rate My Professor.
That sounds
That
fun.
may be cool. Yeah. So we can add our professors in here. We can mark them off if they're going to be a letter of recommendation writer, potential writer, and we're going to have a new note box open up so you can leave some comments, some thoughts and reflections about that professor. Hopefully in the future we have some more letter of recommendation features for Mapped, but that's what we have right now. If there's a course, let's say you're a non-traditional student, you went to UC Riverside 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe the course that you took isn't offered anymore, so it's not going to be potentially in this school list or this course list here that we have. You can add the course under here under add new course route and tell us what it is. It'll be added to your list that you can then go and create a new course, and then we'll try to approve it for everyone else to use as well. Our activities are fun. So we view this as not just a spreadsheet to track, not just a log to track your hours, but an actual diary entry, kind of a journal entry, making sure that everything that you are doing, you are keeping track of, right? Scott and I talk about this all the time. It's the reflection. It's what was so important about this event for you. And you obviously don't have to do this every time. And Rachel, this is maybe a bug for our release, is get rid of that required there. Mm-hmm. And that should change to reflection too. We didn't talk about that this morning, but the description here, if you don't want to type something, you don't have to, but the goal is to reflect on each of your events and talk about something important that happened to you on that day, so that when it comes time to applying, you can go back and look at all of this information. We'll automatically keep track of your hours and everything. Obviously, that's a simple thing to do, but just a nice little addition there. We can keep track of our MCAT scores. So if you're in the heat of MCAT prep, you can come in here and say, I took a practice test on Saturday and I got a 127. Let's do the student a 124. I had a 129 and 129. I got a 510. But Scott, will that 124 hold me back? I don't know. And we'll be able to give that feedback, right? We'll be able to, you can list the test prep companies here as well, so we can see how you're doing there. We'll be able to give that feedback to say, hey, that your CAR score is a little bit low, but you'll be okay. Not a problem. We can keep track of our contacts, and we have a med school list. So this is your list right now. It's not sortable or anything, but that's coming. You can have your school list here where you can flag the schools that you want to add to your school list. And when you go back to your school list, they are all there for you.
You want to open it? There you go.
Yeah. When you go into a school, you can see some details about the school. We do not consider this an MSAR replacement at this time, or potentially ever, but we'll have as much data as we can. The social media, students love the social media links, and we're going to pull all the secondary essays in here as well. So lots of fun stuff for the med school list, and then resources and FAQs that we are building out for now. So Mapped is coming, and Mapped is going to be amazing, and that's all I got. Anything else that you want to show, Rachel or Scott?
No, it looks good.
Yeah, it's early days. I mean, so that's what a public beta is all about. It's good. It's going to get a lot better. We're excited. We've got 800 people or so who have pre-ordered, who are in there using it now. I've been so happy with the overwhelmingly positive feedback. And one of the exciting things I think about making the choice to release it while you're still working on continuous improvement is not only do we know it's going to get better, but for people who are using it this year, you're going to have a chance to shape it. Tell us what you want. And if enough people agree and we think it's a good idea, that's going to be part of what you get to use in your tool, because you helped us build it.